is our third months of our cohort, and I'm going to share my screen. This is always a pain. Session 3, here we go. So I'm really excited to see you all. I know we have some folks missing today, and that's to be expected. This session, we're going to be talking about understanding demand. So we're kind of launching into thinking about sectors and thinking about market opportunities and value chains. But before we jump into this, we have a guest speaker, who I'll introduce in a moment. Actually, I'll introduce her now. Shauna Ratner is here. She is the principal of Yellowwood Associates, which is here in Vermont. And Shauna and I have worked together in some form or another for over 20 years. I was just realizing this, Shauna. So crazy. But I will let her introduce more of kind of how she fits into all of this in a minute. But I wanted to start with our objectives, which are continuing to get to know each other, talking about the demand-driven approach of wealth creation, and hear from Shauna about understanding demand. But before that, we're going to do another icebreaker. It's not a silly one. It's kind of more on target for what we're talking about. I'll try to find another more casual one next time. But and I know as we keep doing this, we know each other, but for Shauna's benefit, let's keep doing it. So I'm gonna stop sharing. So if we can say our names, organization, and maybe since we are all over the country, where you are, and the sector that you may be interested in as we think about value chains. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so I can see you all. Cassidy, you want to go first?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning where I am. So I'm in Alaska. Good morning. My name is Cassidy Cameron, and I'm the Executive Director for the Kenai Peninsula Economic Development District. We are interested in all sectors, so workforce development, energy, cost of living, quality of living standards, transportation, all of those things that make our economic fabric thrive and functioning and sustainable. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Cassidy. David.
Hey, everybody. Dave Struck. I'm the Economic Development Coordinator with the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments in Detroit. And so, of course, automotive is always a sector we have a great interest in, but also, looking to diversify and like Cassidy said, all sectors. Defense in particular is one that's growing as well. So, no favorites here.
Okay, great. Let Ian in. Okay, great. Jared.
Hi, I'm Jared Burdue, a Senior Development Planner with the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission, located in Benton Harbor. We're primarily interested in terms of this, value add topic with agriculture. That's something that we've incorporated in our SEDS in the past, but we always seem to kind of miss the mark of what we're looking to do. And it's hard to find data. It's hard talking to farmers because they're busy year round. So looking to pull that more front and center.
Right. Okay, perfect. Jess, I know you're one of our partners. So Shauna, just for your information, when folks applied for this cohort, I asked them to bring a partner with them to come to these sessions. So just to preface Jess and Ian, but yes. So anyway, Jess.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Jess Schwager. I'm with the Oklahoma City Community Foundation. I'm the director of scholarship programs, and I work with our community engagement and grant making teams. And Sharon Astrin, who's with the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, Governments is my partner, but she is not able to attend today. So we're kind of tag teaming, but then we're getting together in the in-between.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what Cassidy said. I mean, honestly, like you kind of talked about all sectors. I think so definitely what you said, and then I think one thing that Sharon and I have been working really closely on, because at the Community Foundation, it's something we're talking about a lot, is the workforce development and economic development piece.
Mhm. Great. And I love that you're tag teaming. That's cool. That was kind of the idea, was to kind of collaborate, and yes. And Ian, last but not least.
Hello. Sorry I was a little late, everyone.
Okay.
Melissa, I'm sorry. Could you remind me of
Oh,
the
sorry.
prompt?
Yes.
No, that's okay.
Where name, organization, and like kind of where you are, if it's not abundantly clear, and the sectors that you might be interested in kind of moving forward with the rest of this cohort value chain development kind of piece.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ian McCain. I'm with the City of East Point. I'm the community partner alongside David with SEMCOG, one of their member communities. So super excited to be here with you all again. East Point, for context, we share a border with Detroit, so we're an inner ring suburb just outside. The gateway to Macomb County is one of our monikers. So we're about 5 square miles, 34,000 people. So, and I serve as the economic development manager. So I'm going to admit I am a little behind on
That's okay.
my wealth creation work. So I'm excited to dive back in with you all, but hopefully we'll have a little bit clearer picture as I have a project that's somewhat related to it that I have to finish up today. So
Okay.
more to report at the next session. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ian. Okay, good. I'm gonna share my screen again, and I think, why is this so hard? Okay, I'm there. All right, we're back. Thank you for doing that. And then just to refresh our memories, I like to just refresh our memories with these key principles that we keep talking about: creating wealth, rooting wealth in local ownership, using local ownership, control, and influence, and building livelihoods, which definitely speaks to some of the workforce development things that we've been talking about, that I've been hearing. And then just back to our 8 capitals, which we've talked about in relation to just asset inventory. We've talked about it through the SEDS and the SWOT analysis and an evaluation. But I'm just going to keep talking about these. But and then, you know, we started with the SEDS, or we started with kind of an intro. Then we really talked about the SEDS and how focusing on, I'm going to let Kate in, focusing on assets is really useful in terms of the SEDS in a variety of different ways. And we're kind of entering this kind of value chain development space. And in that sense, you know, the start is understanding demand, which is where we are today. And I brought Shauna in. Shauna and I have worked together for a very long time, and we've worked specifically on wealth creation for a lot of that time, almost all of that time. And she has written a book about this, and she has worked all over the country and around the world. And I just thought, especially this part is so important, and it kind of lays the foundation for anything that we're going to be talking about with value chain development. So, luckily she said yes, and here she is, and I'm going to kind of let her take it from here. And Shauna, feel free to kind of introduce any, you know, kind of however you want to do it. You've seen these slides, but if you want to start before that, go for it.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. And I just want to let you all know it's a real pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and to introduce you to the concept of demand as it is used in the wealth creation framework. Because the way that we use it is different than the way other economic development frameworks think about it and use it. And just to give you an idea of how different, Melissa and I had the opportunity to apply for money from the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. They were soliciting proposals from all around the world for consultants to come in and help with value chain development in Afghanistan. And we, with a partner of ours, submitted a proposal and we got a call back from them. And the callback said, hey, of the 42, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, proposals we received from all around the world, yours was the only one that talked about demand. You seem to be the only people who understand how to communicate with the demand side of the market. So instead of doing the project that you originally outlined, which had to do with developing a couple of different value chains, the person at UNIDO said to us, we want you to do a thorough exploration of many, many demand opportunities in Afghanistan so that over time we can foster 100 or more value chains. We don't want to foster just one or two. We want to foster lots. But to do that, he understood that they needed to understand demand in a way that no one else had suggested was even possible. So, so I feel like a fair degree of confidence in saying to you that this is not an everyday approach. It's not something that everyone understands or knows how to do or understands the power of. Next slide, please. So why do we start on the demand side? The demand side of the market is the side of the market that buys things, right? That's what we mean by demand. It's the purchasing side. It's the purchasing power. And it's the driver of what happens in our economy. You can make something, you can make a lot of something. If no one wants to buy it, it's not going to have any value, right? And so the way that many economic development activities are structured is to look at who's producing what and help them produce more of it, which is really not too bright, considering that they could be producing a lot of it, but if they're not producing it in a way that people want, it's not necessarily going to redound to their benefit. So we start not on the supply side, we start on the demand side, and we say, look, who is it out there who might have an interest in the kinds of things we might be able to figure out how to produce? And this is goods and services and mixtures of goods and services. We need to get to know those people, not as statistics in a market survey, not as secondary literature on what's happening in agriculture, what are the hot market opportunities, but as actual people who are running companies or in the purchasing department of companies or otherwise involved directly with the procurement of goods and services for their companies and for the people that their companies sell to, right? And we'll talk a little bit about who those folks are. We call them demand partners, and we'll talk about the characteristics of those folks. But the reason we start with them and the reason we talk about building relationships with them is because they have the market intelligence to inform our producers of what's happening out there. They're the ones who have their fingers on the end consumer because they have to know what's happening with the end consumer to survive, right? If you're a distributor, you better know what's in fashion and in season this year, whether your sector is textiles or your sector is food or your sector is transportation. What is it that people are interested in buying this year that's different from last year or different from the year before? And what do you need to be able to give them to get them excited about buying what you have to offer? Well, conversely, you can only give it to them if you can get it yourself, right? And the only way you can get it yourself is if you're in contact with the people who are supplying you, right? And not just going out on the open market and trying to look for it. That can be very frustrating if you're a buyer. You can't find the thing that consumers really want. So it's very important to have relationships with demand partners because that's what contributes to the resilience of your value chain. I'm going to give you just a quick example of this. During COVID, there was a very successful textile-based value chain out of North Carolina that had been operating for several years, and they had been collaborating and just doing a great job of figuring out how to pool their resources and share some things so that they could generate more and more customer volume of customer interest and grow their markets. And then COVID hit. and nobody was going to retail stores to buy clothes. So their buyers kind of said, yeah, no, we can't just buy and stock inventory when we aren't moving it. And they said, so what are we going to do to stay alive? And they realized there was a huge demand, as you may well recall, for masks and for gowns. And so they were able, because they had strong relationships throughout the value chain, including with a variety of demand partners, to connect with their demand partners and say, how about we pivot collectively to supplying gowns and masks, which you can sell, which there is a market for, which will help you stay alive and will help us stay alive. And they did it. They did it. A similar kind of pivot occurred in Vermont with alcohol producers. Vermont has quite a nascent booze industry, I would say. And those folks had a similar problem, right? That people weren't going shopping anymore, right? They weren't going to stores. So what were they going to do? So they had the brilliant idea of converting their value chain to making alcoholic disinfectant, using the same processes they had been using, but packaging it, making a different product, packaging it differently, and selling it through somewhat different channels. So that saved them during COVID. So this ability to pivot is part of what comes from having strong relationships, not only within your value chain, but also with your demand partners, because when you're facing a crisis in demand, they also often are facing a crisis in how to respond to rapid changes in demand that works backwards to their suppliers. Second reason to build these relationships is because when you understand what a demand partner really needs to be successful, and you are able to arrange, structure your value chain to supply that thing or those things that spell success for your demand partner, guess what? You're no longer providing a commodity. This is a big deal in agriculture in particular, right? Where many producers essentially produce commodities and they have no power over the pricing. It's purely a matter of supply and demand. But if you're producing something in a way that meets specific needs of your buyer, and that might be the nature of the product itself, or it might be a service that you're the only one who's going to deliver it, at midnight in a particular place at a particular time that really works for the buyer. Or it could be that you're the only one that can do it in a range of colors, or you're the only one that can do it using recycled material, or whatever it is, right? Something that makes what you're providing not a commodity. When that happens, you end up with preferred provider status. And I'm going to give you an example of that. In the Northeast, there was a distributor of apples, and their name is not coming to me right at this moment, but that's okay. It doesn't really much matter. And they had been working with organic apple producers throughout the Northeast for about a decade, for a long time. And those producers had provided them with a lot of marketing collateral about these apples came from my farm. Here are pictures of me and my kids. We pick these apples. We use integrated pest management. They're all organic. We have particular varieties, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the consumers that this distributor sold to, the stores where the consumers bought, were quite bought into these apples. They really looked forward to getting them every fall. They knew which farmers' apples they liked the best and all that kind of stuff. It had been very successful. Well, one year there was a drought, a devastating drought in the Northeast, and none of the orchards had apples. And so the question was, what was the buyer going to do? The buyer had a choice. The buyer could say, oh well, no apples from you. I guess we'll just go buy our apples from someplace else. We'll get them in Washington State and we'll sell them, and that's that. Sayonara. But because of the long-standing relationship, the buyer said, we know we don't want to do that. We want you Northeast farmers to be around to produce for us for years to come. And we know that if we don't have any income this year from us, you're going to go under. That's not okay with us. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to buy the apples wherever you feel like procuring them. And we're going to buy them from you, thus giving you enough money to stay in business and continue to operate for years to come, right? and we're gonna, the pricing is gonna work out so that you have enough profit so that it's gonna work for you. And we're doing this because we're invested next year in having your same apples. And we will explain to our buyers and to our consumers what happened this year about the drought, et cetera, which is going to be very transparent. And to know that next year when the weather's better, they can count on going back to the apples that they're used to receiving. So that never would have happened if there hadn't been a tangible, real personal relationship between the farmers and the buyer. Right? If the buyer had just been an abstraction, they would have just found the apple someplace else. That would have been the end of that. So another reason why these relationships are important is because your demand partners can end up being investors in your value chain. And I'm going to give you an example from Afghanistan for this one, because it was just so remarkable. One of the things we did, and I think that Melissa is going to have you do something quite similar here. One of the things we did is we taught Afghan folks how to identify demand partners and then how to go out and interview them and talk to them. And so we had particular sectors we were looking at, and one of them was tomatoes, because everyone in Afghanistan grows tomatoes, but they have no way of storing them after they're harvested, so they go bad within a few days, and they're usually many of them, are wasted. And there's a lot of unmet demand throughout the year for tomatoes and tomato products. So in talking to the buyers of tomatoes and a range of potential tomato products that could be produced in Afghanistan, some of which were already being produced at a very micro level, others of which had never been produced there, but could be. One of the questions they asked was, would it be worth it for you to invest in the creation of a value chain that would get you these products in a reliable way? And invest can mean many things. Invest can mean, would you give them money? Would you give them market information? Would you provide them with transportation? Would you provide them with storage? Would you provide them with your expertise on how to think about tomato varieties? Would you, help them put up greenhouses? What kinds of investment might you make? And of the 40 demand partners who were interviewed, 38 of them expressed a strong willingness to invest in multiple ways to develop the value chain that would serve them by giving them the tomatoes and tomato products that they knew they had a market for but couldn't get. Right? So, and there are examples from the US too. I just thought that was particularly striking, because it turned out in Afghanistan to be true for every product that we looked at. The buyers were really willing to invest in their capacity to be able to obtain what they needed and what they knew there was a market for. So finally, when you have a relationship with demand partners, and it should never clearly be just one, right? You don't ever want to be dependent on one buyer. So partners is an important concept. The partners will pull your product through the market. And what that means is they're going to come to you and say, we want X amount of this. We got this last year. Now we want twice as much, and we want it this way, and we want it that way. And you will be you will know what you're producing for and who you're producing for and what you're producing ahead of the actual production, right? Instead of producing a whole lot of whatever it is, beans, we're the pinto bean capital of the world. We produce a lot of pinto beans. Here's a ton of pinto beans, want it, right? That's push, right? That's coming up to the market saying, here's what we have to sell. Do you want it? That's not what this is. This is, what do you want? What do you need? How can we help you get it? Let's work together so that we can get you what you actually need. And then you're going to be looking to us for that, because we understand and we've set up a system that can get you that, right? Okay, and I just want to say, if you have questions at any point or you want clarification at any point, just put your hand up, stop me, interrupt, whatever you need to do. Okay. All right, next slide. So there's essentially 3 types of demand to be aware of in this work: effective demand, ineffective demand, and what we call nascent demand. Effective demand is what many of us have. It's when we have money in our pocket, we're able to afford to buy the thing we want. There just isn't enough of it. We can't find it. So again, go back to COVID, toilet paper, right? there was a lot of unmet effective demand. Everybody wanted toilet paper. There wasn't enough out there, but it wasn't because people couldn't afford it, right? It's because there just wasn't enough of it being produced at that point or being distributed at that point. So that's effective demand. If you can identify an area where people have the money to buy, as in Afghanistan, for example, these tomatoes, there was plenty of effective demand. There just wasn't enough product, right? So that's one kind of demand, and that's the relatively straightforward kind to tap into and to address. The second type is ineffective demand, and it's actually fascinating. So ineffective demand is when people want something and they know they want it, but they can't afford it. So whether it's housing or food or workforce training, you name it, right? They know they want it, they know they need it, but they can't afford it. At which point, you have the opportunity, you as people who are conceiving of value chains, have the opportunity to figure out how could you go about producing that thing, that again, combination of goods and services, in such a way that it becomes affordable. I'll give you an example. In India, and I apologize for the noise in the background, I'm having some work done. In India, lots and lots of people knew they wanted and needed shampoo, but they couldn't afford it because it came in big bottles. And they simply couldn't pay for a big bottle. But when someone said, a way to tap into that ineffective demand is to resize the product into much smaller packages. Suddenly they could afford it. They could afford to spend a little bit of money every week to have enough shampoo for 1 or 2 or 3 showers, but they couldn't afford to buy a big bottle that would last a month. That just wasn't going to happen, right? But by being clever about how the product was packaged in this instance, it was made affordable, and that ineffective demand became effective demand. And again, there are many, many, many different stories about that, but it's an amazing. Another story is housing. I could give you a housing related story. So in Kentucky, there's a group called, actually, I'll give you an energy efficiency story. There's a group called MASET, Mountain Association for Community Economic Development. And they understood that in Kentucky, although the cost of energy per unit, per watt or kilowatt is quite low relative to the national average, the amount people spend on electricity per month is about the highest in the country. The reason for that is because their houses are not energy efficient. They're not insulated. The windows are terrible. And there's no efficiency standard at all in place. And they wanted to change that. But the question was, how do you make it affordable for someone to make their home energy efficient? The bulk of the population in Kentucky doesn't have a lot of money. So how are you going to do this? So they did some research, and they realized there's a process called on-bill financing, where essentially the cost of the upgrade to energy efficiency is built into the savings on the bill that the house owner experiences once the efficiency measures are in place. And so the house owner benefits from a portion of the savings, but a portion of the savings go back to the utility company to pay for the energy upgrade over time. And that process runs with the building. So if the building's sold, the next buyer has the same obligation to repay that the first person had. So they were able to find common cause with the utility companies, the coal-fired utility companies, who had been considered their enemy for, again, decades. They had been fighting them in court over their coal-fired environmental damages. They went to them and said, hey, what about this efficiency thing? Can we find any common ground? And the utility companies said, we actually can, because you know what? Our customers can't pay their bills. And their efficiency companies are mostly rural electric co-ops. It's a really bad look for a rural electric co-op in which the members are the people who own the co-op are the members, right? Who are the customers, to be going after their members for not being able to pay their bills. So they said, we can see how working with you to increase the energy efficiency is going to lower those bills substantially, make them much more affordable. We'll have a lot fewer people not able to pay. The housing stock will be of much higher quality and worth more. And, and you'll be happy because there'll be, less energy being used. And it sounds like a win-win to us. And so at the very first national meeting we had about this project, when it was first starting, when we were first developing the wealth creation framework, someone from the co-op came to the meeting, and one of the co-ops in Kentucky, and it was fascinating, right? Because they said, we had never had a kind word to say about Mayset. And Mayset said, yeah, likewise, we had never had a kind word to say about the rural electric co-op. We had been at each other's throats for a very long time. And yet here we are, we're working together, and we each see self-interest and shared interest in making this thing work. And as far as I know, it's still working today. It was working very effectively for quite a while. So that's ineffective demand. Third kind of demand is nascent demand. Now, what's nascent demand? How many people on this call remember a world before cell phones? Raise your hand. Whoa, look at that. That's great. Okay. So in the world before cell phones, how many of us knew that we needed a cell phone? None of us. I mean, it wouldn't have dawned. I mean, maybe there were a few futuristic people who were thinking, oh, that could be cool. But for the vast majority of us, we had no idea, right? No idea. And yet, somehow, look at us. I bet there's not a single person on the call who doesn't own a cell phone, right? So that's nascent demand. Nascent demand is when people don't know that there's something that they need or want or that would change their lives because they've never imagined it. They've never thought about it. They've never experienced it. But if you can figure out what that thing is, there may well be a market for it. And so that's the third kind of demand. And one example of that is, I don't know how many of you have heard of Mamava, but Mamava is a company, it was based in Vermont, that came up with the idea of lactation pods. That is, places women could go that were private, in airports, in bus stations, in offices, where they could nurse. They could either nurse or they could pump breast milk for their babies in a secluded, safe environment. If you go to any airport pretty much now today, anywhere you go, you will find Mamava pods. They're there and they're being used. But it was a brand new idea. It was not an idea that anyone had conceived of. No one came to them and said, we need a lactation pod. Could you please, build one for us? They said, we think the world needs lactation pods. Let's figure this out, right? And when they figured it out, then they were able to find demand partners who said, yeah, you're right. We really, this is something we ought to be providing for people. So innovative products and services can tap into nascent demand. And you will learn, the more you talk to your demand partners, the more you will learn about these three types of demands. The more you will begin to understand, oh, this is where there's effective demand. This is where there's ineffective demand. And this is where there might be nascent demand. How can we partner to capture some of that? All right, next slide. So when we talk about being demand driven, and I should say that if your work in value chains is not demand driven, then it is not using the wealth creation framework. It's that simple, right? This is not the only, certainly as we know, not the only principle of WealthWorks, but it is a key one. It is a key differentiation, right? So when we talk about being demand driven, we mean know your demand partners personally, not through some YouTube video that you watched. Know them up close and personal. Understand what they need. Help them to understand what you need to be able to meet their needs. That's where they become partners with you, and that's where they can become investors. That's where their flexibility in procurement can make the difference between your success and lack of it. So it's important, both those kinds of understanding. And then organize your value chain to meet the needs of your demand partners while creating multiple forms of wealth inclusively. So the real secret to the wealth creation framework and its success isn't what you do, it's how you do it. Right? I mean, there'd be many ways of producing lactation pods, but doing it in a way that provides jobs for mothers and and low-income mothers, and in a way that uses recycled materials, and in a way that that minimizes transportation costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are ways of shaping a value chain to create multiple forms of wealth, and to do it in an inclusive way. Okay, next slide. So I spoke a little while ago about interests and finding interests. This is really important, and we talk about three kinds of interests in wealth creation. We talk, first of all, about self-interest. What's in it for me? And that's a question that has to have a positive answer for every single partner in your value chain. Anybody in your value chain, whether it's, and we'll get into the types of partners at a later date, but whatever kind of partner you have, whoever's involved, has to feel like there's something in it for them. Otherwise, why would they be there? And why would they stay there, right? So that self-interest piece it's not a dirty word. It's really important. And the same with your demand partner. There has to be something in it for them. The second level of interest is what we call shared interest, which is what's in it for us. If I help you, is that also going to help me? Huh, maybe so, right? If I help you, tomato farmer, scale up your ability to dry tomatoes, it's going to help me because then I can sell those tomatoes at a profit. So there's a shared interest there in making this thing work. And the third kind of interest is what's in it for everyone. And it was fascinating, and this can be true in the United States as well, but it was fascinating in Afghanistan how many of the demand partners that we spoke with, or that we didn't speak with directly, but that our Afghan partners spoke with, said how much they cared about the community, how much they cared about the well-being of youth, the well-being of women, the well-being of people in the villages that they grew up in, the well-being of the environment, and so they wanted to be doing business in ways that were good, not just for their business, but good for the community, good for the country. Those things mattered, and there are those people, in this country as well. And the way you find that out is by getting to know them and talking to them and finding out what the full range of their interests and concerns and values really are. It is, I know it's hard to believe, particularly in our current environment, but it actually is a myth that businesses are all profit maximizing. That's not actually what's going on for most businesses. Most businesses are maximizing other features as well, as profit, not only profit. And so in there somewhere, there is the ability to begin to identify common interests.
To that point, Shauna, I actually just finished this book, Rescuing Capitalism, Vermont Shows a Way. So to that point of businesses wanting to do something beyond profits. So written by a colleague of mine here in Heinsberg, but
No way.
move us, I know. Anyway, kind of fun. Okay, onward.
So onto the nitty gritty where the rubber hits the road here. What is a demand partner, or who is a demand partner? So when we talk about demand partners, we're not talking about the end consumers, right? If you had to go out and talk to every potential end consumer, no, that's not going to work. We're talking about the businesses or organizations that serve the end consumer. So we're talking about the intermediary connectors between supply and retail, the retail end, whatever the retail end is, whether it's a store, whether it's online, or whether it's, businesses or government, whoever the final buyer is. So in a food value chain, the demand might include institutional buyers like hospitals or school systems or distributors, right? So you might want to talk to the folks who run a grocery chain, right? Or the folks who run the hospital system, or the folks who, the largest employers in town who have cafeterias, or, right? So you're going to not the end consumer, but the intermediate group that has their finger on the pulse of what's going on with the end consumer, right? The people who run in cafeterias may say, they really want local vegetables, but we don't know how to get them. We don't got a clue. So if your value chain can help us figure that one out, that'd be really worth something to us, because that's what our people are asking for. We just don't know how to respond. And you'd be amazed at the disconnects in the system. I mean, when we were doing this work, we had a meeting in the South with Campbell's Soup and Walmart and a bunch of other really large scale buyers about how they might want to connect with locally produced products from the South. And they all said, you know, we don't have any connections with farmers in the South. We don't have any idea how to source this stuff. If you can help us solve that problem and make it work for us, sure, we'd love it. But it's a complete unknown for us, right? So there's real work there, right? There's real opportunity there. But it's not going to happen without somebody stepping in and getting proactive about making those connections and figuring out what it takes to make them actually work and to make them work profitably all along the chain, right? So part of the reason I was interested in the sectors that you mentioned is so that it sounds like there's a lot of attention to workforce development. So who's the demand partner for workforce development? Well, we did some work in Texas along the Rio Grande, in the Rio Grande Valley. And they went, the group that was working there went out to the medical establishment in the valley and asked them what was going on, what kind of workers they weren't able to get, essentially. And what they found out was no one could get workers who had good soft skills. That is, they were good working with people, they were good, they knew how to come on time, you know, they were appropriately dressed, they had you know, a friendly demeanor, all those things, right? And it was a consistent problem. So this particular group didn't have the bandwidth at the end of the day to pull this off, but they identified a very clear opportunity where many employers potentially could have been brought together to create a training program that would benefit all of them, right? That would focus on specifically the things that they were finding that they had need for, that the current environment was just not supplying them with. Okay, next slide. So what makes a good demand partner? So this is important to listen to because I think the next step in your work is going to be to identify a few of these folks. So a good demand partner is an intermediary that has their finger on the pulse of market demand, so their finger on the pulse of what end buyers are looking for and not looking for and changing their minds about. It's somebody who's seeking goods or services that are not readily available, because if they were readily available, why would they need you, right? You have to be solving some problem that they have that they're not already able to solve. The volume that they are going to demand has to be greater than can be met by any single existing business. Otherwise, why have a value chain, right? They see their own self-interest in partnering with regional firms to build stronger communities and a stronger and more resilient economy. So they have some sense of common interest. They have the flexibility to adjust their procurement practices to work with an emerging value chain. So they understand that this is going to, you know, any value chain goes through stages. It goes through exploration, and then it's piloted, and then it's implemented, and then it goes to scale. And so if you're starting something from scratch, you have to have somebody who's willing to work with you through exploration, through piloting, ultimately to implementation and to scale. They have to understand it's not going to be an overnight solution. And ideally, they have the willingness and ability to invest in helping you establish this value chain. And finally, they're solvent, right? You don't want to invest in a value chain partner who's about to go bankrupt. That would be unfortunate, right? And the second piece of that, equally important, is they're honest. And they're going to be a non-exploitative partner. Okay. So sometimes not every partner is the right partner, and sometimes you will come across a partner who says, oh yeah, this is great. And what they're really looking for is how to extract the most possible value for themselves out of the value chain. And they don't care if they run everybody else into the ground. It's not going to work. Okay. So if you run into that kind of partner, you just, you know, cut ties. And sometimes you don't know until you're, you know, a little bit down the road, if that's really what's going on. But I'm here to tell you that that's not everybody. those can be very disheartening experiences, but there are demand partners who are not looking to do that and who do understand that it has to work for everyone to be sustainable. So as you think about demand partners that you might approach, think about what is currently produced in your area, including the byproducts of production. And if it's a workforce development question, think about, are there sectors that have need for similarly trained labor, similarly trained workforce? And what are those? Think about the underutilized, potentially productive resources that may exist in your place, because that's part of wealth creation. Is there something you're going to be able to bring into play that maybe has been ignored or left out? Think about the entrepreneurial ideas and the practices that you know about, maybe ideas that people have to fulfill, to meet ineffective demand or to meet nascent demand. Think about the 3 kinds of demand. And then begin to think in the sectors or subsectors you want to work in, who are these folks? Specifically, who are these folks? Who are the businesses? Who are the people within the businesses? Are you going to want to talk to the president of the business? Are you going to want to talk to the procurement, branch of the business? Are you going to if you're doing workforce development, you probably want to talk to HR. You also probably want to talk to some of the floor managers, if it's a manufacturing situation, to really understand what they're seeing for strengths and what they'd like to be seeing and weaknesses. But you're really going to want to be very concrete in who you identify. Now, I'll give you an example of this from Hardin County. Melissa and I did some work earlier this year in Ohio. And one of the things they have in Ohio, in this particular section of Ohio, are a bunch of beef producers. But they have very little outlet for local beef. And so we had urged them to identify demand partners. And they identified one guy who was running a restaurant. I think it's a barbecue restaurant. Am I right? Is that what it was? And yeah.
Yeah, that was right.
And he had aspirations to grow his business and possibly even to, add additional restaurants onto his business. And so they talked to him about, what do you need? What do you want? What form do you want it in? What's going to work for you? What's not? What's working for you now? What's not? And one of the favorite questions we like to ask, and you might not ask it in exactly these words, but the basic idea is, what keeps you up at night, right? What are the things that you're most worried about that make it hardest for you to feel that your business is going to succeed? And he had some answers to those questions. And he was able to help people understand what it was exactly he needed and why, and what it was that they could do productively with the other parts of the animal that were not going to be the brisket that he wanted, and how they could stagger their production to be able to meet his needs year round. One of the tricky things about agriculture is, typically in a given area, the harvest of a given crop occurs at one time of the year. And for people who need product on a 12 months of the year basis, either you have to figure out how to preserve that harvest, or you have to figure out how to stagger it. And with beef, it's possible to stagger it. You just have to plan for it, right? So anyway, that was very interesting. Another interesting thing that came out of Hardin County was the idea of being able to produce electricity from pig manure, hog manure, lots and lots of hog farms, and energy co-ops that were looking to diversify energy sources. So very interesting potential there, and kind of what a value chain might look like that would allow that to happen. Yeah. What's next on here? All right. So you come up with some names, right? You come up with some ideas. And now the question is, how are you going to build this relationship? You're going to cold call, you're going to pick up the phone. What are you going to do? First thing you need to do is do some homework. Understand something about who it is you're going to talk to, what their business does, and learn some of their vocabulary if you can. So go to some of the trade publications in that sector and learn a little bit about what are the hot topics, what's the language that they use. Nothing expresses connection and concern and awareness as much as being able to use some of the language that folks use themselves, right? It tells them you've done some homework, you've read up, you care, you want to be able to communicate with them. And even if you're not sure you're using it right, correctly, even if you can say, I read this term, I think it means, am I right? They'll be so happy that you've looked into their industry enough to even know that that's a term, right? That's a good thing. So do some homework, develop a set of questions, and Melissa certainly will be able to help you with this, with some follow-ups. What kind of information do you really need to know? And again, some of those questions are probes around what makes a good partner so that you can discern, is this somebody who's likely to be a good partner? Make an appointment explaining that you'd like to learn more about what they do and about what it is they're having a hard time procuring. Do not make an appointment that says, I'm here to sell you something, right? That's not what the conversation's about. And that can be very difficult because that's what many people tend to want the conversation to be about. We're doing this and we'd like you to buy it. Nope, that's not what these conversations are about. These conversations are about, who are you? What are the issues you're facing? Okay. Well, could we work with you to overcome those issues in the following ways? What does that sound like to you? Could you help us figure out, maybe we could overcome it this way, maybe we could overcome it that way? That's the conversation you want to get into. Let them know you're in the early stages of looking for potential demand partners, and and then see if you can arrange a second meeting, right? And see what questions they have for you. What do they want to know, right? About the number of people that you're working with, the capacity to supply. So if you're only working with one farmer, that's probably not going to get you very far. But if you can say, we've talked to 30 farmers and they're all producing turnips, and and we came to you because we know that you're using turnip roots to make botanical ointments. I mean, you would think I'm nuts making this stuff up, but I'm not actually as nuts as you might think, or maybe I am. But it is one of the things that comes out of this work is you learn about amazing hidden uses of things you never would have thought, right? So if you get into all the ways to use a turnip, and this is a particular piece of research I've not done, but you may discover that there are some emerging uses of parts of turnips, like perhaps even roots, that are high end and important, but they only work if the turnip is cultivated a certain way, right? So keep an open mind, I guess is what I'm saying. Keep an open mind. You never know what you're going to discover. So possible questions. What are the biggest challenges you're having with your business? And I'm guessing here the workforce development is going to rise. If you're going in to talk to people about that, that's going to be a thing for folks. What are your customers demanding that you cannot readily supply now? And that could be a good or service, or it could be, a type of employee. Our customers really want people who can come to their homes and do da-da-da-da-da. And we're all set up so that they bring stuff to us. We're not sure how to make that transition, right? What would they like to be able to buy and sell if they could get it? If they buy and sell from outside your region, would they be willing to buy or sell something that was produced in the region if it were available? And what quality standards would that have to meet? What pricing points would that have to meet? And then outside of making a profit, because if businesses don't make a profit, they don't stay in business for a very long. What matters most to them? What are their values? Is it their image they're trying to burnish? Is it helping the community? Is it protecting the environment? What is it that they care about, right? Is it kids' sports? You never know, right? But if you can find out, then you can figure out a way, if you're clever, to begin to have your value chain be part of that conversation, right? And then, of course, what questions do they have for you?
Cool.
What I will say is that, and another question that's not on this list that at some point would be, is If after your first conversation or your first several conversations, you have a good vibe and you feel like this is a demand partner that really could work, and ideally you've got more than one at that point, would they be willing to come and talk with other potential members of the value chain? Okay? Because
Yeah.
there is nothing that supercharges a value chain and interest in a value chain as much as hearing from a demand partner. Right? You put a demand partner in the room and you have them say, so that, let's say it's, I'm making this up, but let's say it's a demand partner for turnips, and you have 30 turnip farmers, and you have farm equipment suppliers, and you have people who rent their property to turnip growers, and you have people who harvest turnips, and you have the turnip processing plant, and you have whatever you have, right? They're in the room. You have the plastic supplier and whatever it is, all the fertilizers. And you say to those folks, here's a demand partner. Here's what they're looking for. Or again, a couple demand partners. They are willing to buy X number of tons of turnips per year if they have these characteristics, right? And right now they can't get them. Or right now they're importing them from Uruguay, and they'd really much rather get them locally. All of a sudden, the wheels start to turn, right? And the folks in the room start to say, oh my God, we had no idea. Right? We had no idea that this market was there. How could we organize ourselves to take advantage of this? And then you're off and running, right? Having a concrete buyer in the room does so much to energize that conversation and keep it from going off in the abstract, right? Really grounding it to what's possible. And this grows because as you figure out how to solve problems for one buyer, you get much more nimble at solving problems for the next buyer and the next buyer. And your value chain begins to learn that to succeed, it has to work as a team. It's not a bunch of discrete businesses that never talk to each other. It's a team of producers who depend on one another to each do the job they're best at doing, so that at the end of the day, they are actually meeting the needs of the demand partner. What comes out the other end meets the needs of the demand partner. But they have to be in communication with each other, and they have to trust each other, and they have to be able to work together in order to make that happen. That's what makes a wealth creation value chain.
Great. Thanks, Shauna.
Sure.
I do want to introduce our homework and everything, but I know that Edwin and Alejandra joined us kind of midway, and I wanted to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. And also, our icebreaker today was any kind of sectors that you're interested in considering as we move forward in this value chain conversation. So sorry to put you on the spot, but Edwin.
Hello, afternoon.
Hi.
My name is Edwin. I'm a planner 2 at the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council. In terms of industry, I would say maybe aviation and aerospace, because that has been the largest growing industry, specifically by the Space Coast, where
Yeah.
NASA is. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would say aviation, aerospace.
Great. Thanks, Edwin.
And the
Alejandra?
presentation was,
Oh.
sorry, I was gonna say the presentation was really nice. And I actually saw one of the pods in the St. Louis airport, so that was cool to see.
That's a great example, Shauna. I haven't processed that as such a great example. It really is. Yeah. Alejandra?
Hi everyone, Alejandra Bejarano with Region 9 Development Commission out of South Central Minnesota in Mankato. This was really helpful. I'll watch the recording for the first couple of minutes, but I would say in our region, it would be manufacturing and agriculture are our two largest industries. So I would be using a lot of this to engage with them.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, I know, Shauna, definitely, there's a lot there. If folks have questions or kind of demand partners you're thinking about, or anything. Yeah, it's kind of open floor at this point, but then I'll introduce kind of what I'm hoping you'll do, which is really find a couple of demand partners and actually start to have these conversations. But yeah, any kind of initial thoughts as you're processing all that you've heard over the past hour?
I'll jump in real quick.
Yeah.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. For us, I mean, our capacity is pretty limited. It's really only myself for economic development, but thinking how we can partner with our economic development organizations and augment some of their scripts when they go in for business visits, and how can they obtain some of this information and provide support in the ways you've outlined. So got the gears spinning in my head and looking forward to diving in more.
Great.
Nice.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah. Anyone else? Anything else on folks' minds? And again, I know it's as you process it, you may have questions. You can feel free to reach out to. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and jump in, Melissa.
Right.
Hello again, everyone. One thing that I've been thinking through a little bit here in East Point is how to capitalize on the, maybe capitalize is not the right word, but how to take advantage of the bounty we have here in Michigan. I learned at a conference a number of years ago, and then the same person who told it to me was reminded me about it, that Michigan has the second greatest crop diversity in the country, behind California, but we lag behind in the number of food-based businesses, whether you're talking about like restaurants, production, things like that. So, and in where we're at in Macomb County, they've put together a rural like agricultural plan and have started to purchase and protect agricultural easements of longtime family farms. So something that I've been trying to figure out is how do we take all of the great food that they're growing in the northern part of the county and send it down Gratiot Avenue so we can, can it, cook it, and ship it or serve it here in East Point. And in particular, our county doesn't have any licensed commercial commissary kitchens for food-based entrepreneurs to grow from. So that's another thing I've been working so far unsuccessfully, but I think I'm almost there. I'm trying to get going here. So.
Great.
Nice. Do you have any institutions that like schools that have gone out of business that had a kitchen, or other infrastructure that, firehouses that had a kitchen that could be brought back into life?
Yeah, so we do have an active school district. That's another hat that I wear, as I sit on the school board. But so we have about 2,300 students across 7 buildings. So that is one thing I was thinking of, again, from a food perspective. And they've recently been working on more like scratch cooking, and have adopted a kind of like healthy living policy for the staff. So I think there's definitely some things that we can do there, as well as just from a broader perspective with the district on a procurement level. We have a newer finance director, so I haven't had a chance to kind of like dig into those things with him, but definitely, pun intended, food for thought.
Nice.
That's great. Excellent. Okay. Any other final thoughts? Anything? I know we talked about workforce, and that's Shauna gave some ideas about kind of where to go with that. I don't know if others have thoughts about that in particular. That seems like something I've heard, but
one thing I didn't say, Melissa, I could throw in here is that when you're getting ready to approach a demand partner, think about who might know someone who might know someone who knows that person, right? Use your networks. Don't be afraid to use your networks. Cold calling is certainly possible. There's nothing wrong with it. It's much nicer if you can go in and say, so-and-so recommended I talk with you.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, by all means.
Yes. And I think that's how so many of the interviews in Afghanistan happened, was like people who knew people who knew people. Yeah, it certainly wasn't us, but other people knew people. But good point.
Yep.
All right. Well, in the interest of, the floor is open. Please feel free to weigh in, but I am going to kind of introduce this, which is, I thought we have a check-in call in 2 weeks. So I thought for that, if you would consider identifying a few potential demand partners for any of the sectors you're thinking about, and do a little preliminary looking into them. And then after our check-in call, if you want to reach out to, we can talk more about how to have those conversations and what they look like, but reach out to a couple and see how that goes. And this will be posted on the cohort page. So, and I'll post this recording and the slides and all of that. But that's my thought. It's kind of the first step to us thinking about value chain development. And it sounds like folks have a couple, maybe 1 or 2 sectors they're thinking about. So it shouldn't be a heavy lift, but yeah, anyway. And I'll see if I can develop some sort of I'll share whatever kind of questions. You saw the questions that we talked about, but I think we have more that I can share with you. So this is where we are, just to remind you, we're at session 3. So we'll talk again on the 19th, and then we'll kind of move through the rest of our time together. And yeah. What else? My usual stuff. This is the WealthWorks website. There's lots of great information there. And the NATO Wealth Creation site also has a lot of stuff. And I'll see if I can put some more stuff on here for this particular assignment too. And then I'm going to keep saying this. The summit is next year. I'm just starting to really plan it in Oregon. I know that's not near lots of you, but I think it will be worth. It will be worth it. It will be fun. I'm looking forward to it. It's in collaboration with Regards to Rural, which is put on by Rural Development Initiatives. And yeah, and this is me. As always, you can reach me here.
And this is the book.
Oh, yes, I know. I forgot to put it in the PowerPoint. Yes, Shauna has written the book about wealth creation. You can buy it wherever you buy books. Yes.
And it has lots more examples in it.
It does. And it goes through all of what we've been talking about and all of what we will be talking about over the next several months. So, yeah. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns, ideas? As always, feel free to reach out if you have questions. I'm happy to get on the phone, or we can set up a call if something's stumping you, or if you want to just strategize a little bit. So yeah.
The one other thing I would say is, don't be afraid to break down your sector into subsectors.
Yes.
So manufacturing is a big swath of the world.
Yeah.
Right. Pick something within manufacturing. Right. Do you have a lot of tool and die people? Do you have, a lot of consumer goods people? What give yourself a focus within that. And the same with workforce development. Give yourself a focus within that, whatever the sector is. And you're going to get a lot further than if you think about it too broadly. And
that's a really good point.
I mean, this should be a real learning experience. And, Jared, I really hear you about being just you, right? It's a lot, but if you can find the time yourself, and I know it might be a big, ask to conduct at least one interview with a demand partner, it might be really revelatory for you. I mean, it's a remarkable experience. Folks aren't used to people coming to them and saying, so what are you having trouble with? And how can we help you? meet that need? And what are the implications of helping you meet that need? I mean, could we get a lot of folks, could we actually build some economic development around helping you meet that need?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's partner development too, as economic development districts. It's just building your partner base that much more. I mean, my guess is a lot of these partners that we are talking about are people you already know in your dealings in your districts, right? Is my guess. I could be wrong, but or you know of them. So it's yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Shauna.
No, I was just gonna say it's I think part of the excitement of this work for me over the years has been watching people get to know demand partners and be surprised, right?
Mhm.
Be surprised by what they're willing to do, what their attitudes really are, how they can be helpful, how they can play a role in lifting other folks up, not just themselves. It can be very heartwarming to, not to make too much of a Hallmark moment out of it, but we make assumptions about other people, and we make assumptions about folks. For example, in the private sector, if you're in the private sector, you must be, somehow evil. I mean, we face that all the time. My business is a for-profit business, and it's amazing the number of times that we were told, no, you can't come to this conference because you're a for-profit, and we only, you must be evil, and we only allow nonprofits. I'm like, excuse me. But so just be aware that a lot of the assumptions that you may well be carrying about different organizations, when you go in and talk to people, you may discover that some of those are not correct, and that can be very liberating.
Yeah. Excellent. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Shauna. I really appreciate you coming and talking to everyone.
You're very welcome.
And yeah, and thank you all for being here as always. I'm looking forward to kind of continuing this journey with all of you. And yeah, reach out with anything on your mind. And if not, I'll see you in 2 weeks. All right. Have a
Good luck.
great rest of your week.
Thanks,
Thanks
Shauna.
again, everybody. Thanks, Shauna.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.